Hey guys, this is Adam Conway with XDA and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Mi 11 Ultra. This is going to be a bit of a unique video because this isn't a review. This is specifically focused on the cameras and on a Twitter poll that I ran late last week. There's going to be some interesting results here and some commentary as regards to what people like in photos and why they like them, so let's get into it. So when the Xiaomi Mi 11 launched, Xiaomi put an interesting comparison on stage. Normally with smartphones you get comparisons between other smartphones, but Xiaomi did it differently with the Mi 11 Ultra. They compared the Mi 11 Ultra to the Sony RX100 M7. Now what's interesting about that is that's something that when we talk about good smartphone cameras, even the best smartphone cameras, generally speaking, can never compare to a proper full-fledged DSLR, primarily due to the sensor size. There are other things going on as well, obviously with lens sizes and different quality lenses, etc. Generally speaking, the sensor size alone is enough to push a DSLR above any smartphone camera that you have on the market, which is why the Mi 11 Ultra is so special, because that massive sensor that's in it is the biggest that's ever been in a smartphone, and large enough that what ends up happening when you take a photo is you actually have a depth of field effect for photos that are up close, that they have that natural bokeh in the background that you'll get on a DSLR. On a lot of smartphones nowadays, that bokeh style effect that you get is software based, using either a portrait mode or just kind of something that a manufacturer has added for tweaking so that it picks up what's closest and artificially blurs the background. That's not happening on the Mi 11 Ultra. Any of the background blurring is natural. So with that little introduction out of the way, I want to talk about what I did. I took a lot of photos on the Mi 11 Ultra. I took a lot of photos on a GH5 on a 25mm lens and an aperture of 1.7, and then a couple of photos on a Lumix G7 with a 42mm focal length 5.6 aperture kit lens. So from there then I took photos on the DSLRs, and then I took photos on the Mi 11 Ultra, and I put up a Twitter poll which was basically equivalent to, hey, which of these do you like? One is a DSLR, one is a Mi 11 Ultra. And I had some really interesting responses of things that I didn't necessarily think of before I put it up. So obviously, if you understand cameras, you will likely see straight away which is the DSLR and which is not. And given that cameras can be kind of niche to understand, a lot of people didn't necessarily know what was happening. So for example, when you looked at the photos, you could see the ones that were more zoomed in were generally the DSLR, and you could also see that the more saturated colours were likely to be the Mi 11 Ultra. But because none of this is, not everybody knows this, so when you're looking at it, people just click the one that they liked most. 5 of 6 times, the Mi 11 Ultra bested the DSLR. So okay, there's a lot to unpack here as to why that happened, but I'm going to just show you the photos that I took at the moment. You can see why the Mi 11 Ultra won. You can see why people like these better, and that's something that, particularly with the GH5, I didn't think of. So when I'm taking my stills, I put up photos and new devices on my Twitter that I get. So the Mi 11 Ultra, for example, I took a bunch of photos of that and stuck them up when I got it. I do this all the time, but there is one specific thing I always have to do, particularly with the lens that I took the photos with. I always have to process the raw photos first. The photos that come out of the camera, the standard JPEGs that are processed, particularly with that lens, but in general I have to anyway, they tend to be lacking in color. They tend to be pretty boring. I have to touch them up in raw therapy, a raw processing application, which basically means that I can bump up the saturation, the vibrance, change the color temperature, etc. That is not something that I did here. The photos here are all straight from the camera, and as a result you can immediately see the difference, that there is basically no color saturation in the GH5. It's very basic, very bare bones. So what happens is, when you compare that to a more saturated image, the more saturated image may not necessarily be accurate or may not have as much quality in the photo, but because it looks brighter, it looks nicer to the human eye, and so people perceive that one as being better. Even if the other one is objectively better in terms of the technical capabilities, that doesn't matter if you have a nicer looking photo. You can take a nice photo on practically any camera that in certain situations will best something 10 times the price of it. Now, in fairness as well, with the Oppo Find X3 Pro photo that I took, I didn't realize that I accidentally kind of screwed it up on the DSLR. It should not have looked as bad as it did. It looked kind of smudged and weird. But aside from that, the rest of them I was surprised to see. The birdhouse, for example, somebody actually quote tweeted it saying that they knew which one it was because the bokeh looked unnatural. On both of those photos, the bokeh is natural. There's no software processing involved. The Mi 11 Ultra was just taking normal photos and it was the depth of field. And then the GH5 has a really exaggerated depth of field when it's on that 1.7 aperture. And that's what I use that lens for, is taking photos of products because it looks really nice with the creamy blurred backgrounds. So no matter what way you look at it, it wasn't possible to tell which was which purely based on the bokeh unless you're familiar with that particular lens that I used. Likewise, the Mi 11 Ultra did a really good job in standard daytime light, cosplaying nearly as a professional DSLR. Now again, you don't get anywhere near the level of control that you would get with a DSLR. For example, raw photos you need to take in the Mi 11 Ultra's Pro mode, and then as well you obviously can't swap out lenses and the like, and photos once you process them from the DSLR will be a lot better. However, I think this is more or less an indictment of the fact that when you take photos on smartphones nowadays, they are social media ready. The photos that I took, all of them are saturated, all of them are vibrant and bright, and they're all as if they were processed to be tuned to this particular use case, which makes sense on a smartphone considering you have Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, which you would upload to straight from your phone. Nobody wants to put them on a computer and process them and then upload them that way. It's not a bad thing. In fact, I don't even think it really matters because anybody who wants to take good photos and process them themselves absolutely can. You can buy a DSLR and take photos that way, or you can take photos in RAW in the Pro mode and then develop them yourself using Snapseed or Lightroom. This is just a little kind of insight, I guess, to how people view photos taken on a smartphone versus a professional camera when they're in their stock states, that is, the photo that they are when you take them. The fact that in 5 of 6 cases the Mi 11 Ultra won doesn't mean that nobody knows a good photo or that people can't objectively view photos. It means that the Mi 11 Ultra is doing a great job at what it's supposed to do, that is, produce social media ready photos. You can take more professional photos on it if you want, but what's going on here is as intended and ultimately a good thing for the consumer. Nobody wants to sit around developing their photos. I enjoy doing it, but that's because I'm a bit of a photo nerd at times, but I don't think most people do. Most people just want to take a photo and stick it up on Instagram, which is perfectly fine. Get a good smartphone camera to do that and you will create photos that look fantastic, which the Mi 11 Ultra does. There isn't much work actually required. The photos all look fantastic when you take them. So look, this was just kind of a shorter video to talk about how the Mi 11 Ultra, you pit it against a DSLR like Xiaomi effectively challenged reviewers to do, and you get some interesting results. Is it better than a DSLR? Probably not. But does it go toe to toe in social media usage, and does it maybe even exceed the capabilities of a DSLR? Possibly. There is a genuine argument to be made here that the Mi 11 Ultra actually is better than a DSLR if your main usage for it is for social media. If you want to sit around developing photos in Lightroom or raw therapy or whatever, then absolutely a DSLR is 100% better. But if you just want to be able to take a photo and stick it up on Instagram within a minute, the Mi 11 Ultra is a no-brainer over a DSLR. Even if it may pain someone to hear that a smartphone camera is being recommended over a DSLR's camera, there are genuine use cases for it. Even if you or I as camera nerds would prefer an actual DSLR, there are merits to using a smartphone camera over a DSLR that I feel often go overlooked, and I think the Mi 11 Ultra highlights these in particular because it points to the fact that not everybody needs a super souped up DSLR camera to take good photos, particularly for social media. As well, a small little thing, this video is filmed on the Mi 11 Ultra. I have filmed this entire thing on the Mi 11 Ultra in 4K 60 FPS, so do let me know what you think of the quality as well, because this is my first time using it for that. I'm going to be, for my full review, taking a lot of videos and photos to kind of show off more, and I will be doing another DSLR versus Mi 11 Ultra comparison. I'll probably run it on Twitter again, because if you look now, you can kind of see which is which. It's fairly easy to. What I think I'll do is I'll try and get the zoom levels the same, etc., and see then on a round 2 how it does. So keep an eye out for that. This has been Adam Conway with XDA TV. Thank you for watching.